had to deal with over the past year and a half. And in fact, Ann Forrest, whom I'm happy to introduce now, was here last year talking about that very thing. Well, now a year later, what is different, and what can we do to prepare for other natural and other disasters? How can we be prepared? And more updates. So, and without further introduction, and we will though put up the link to, it's going to be actually up here, to your previous presentation in case you don't end up repeating what you said last time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for coming back to the program, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Lenny. It's lovely to be back. I was here last August. Time flies. So I hope you have the bandwidth to think about a different kind of disaster than the pandemic. I know we're all pretty tapped out, but I will make this as light as I can. So my name is Ann Forrest. I work with a huge group of volunteers. I am a volunteer. There are dozens of folks standing behind me doing this kind of work. So this is it's not all me, that's for sure. In general, I handle the North Seattle emergency communication hubs. And then we have another really strong volunteer who manages a lot of the overall picture and the South hubs. So I'll talk more about that. And then I do a lot of disaster preparedness teaching, both at a community college level and with the Office of Emergency Management here in Seattle. So next slide. This is what I'm going to talk about today. A really quick overview of the emergency communication hubs. Hopefully you have at least heard the word, and I will do more to explain what that is. And I will talk about how we fit into the overall recovery plan of Seattle. And then I will talk about upcoming drills. So we actually get out in the field and set up our equipment and we test our system, and we're doing it in a very unique way this year. I'm very excited. And then there's been some amazing changes to the Washington Good Samaritan law that I think everybody really needs to know about. And I am proud to work next to the woman that really, truly spearheaded that effort. And then we'll talk a little bit about older adults and resilience and what we've learned, both what the research shows and then just some anecdotal evidence. And then I'm happy to take questions after that. So next slide. Emergency communication hubs. We're going to go through what the words mean in our name. Emergency, that's kind of a no-brainer. It's a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. Another word that's similar to emergency is disaster, kind of a catastrophe where your normal response capabilities are overwhelmed. And that's what we're talking about when the hubs come into play, is when the normal emergency system safety net that we have in our society is not sufficient for the task at hand. So communication is the middle word in our name, and that means that our job, the hub's job, is to help communities communicate, both within themselves and with the larger picture, with the city. So we only stand up a hub when communications are down. If you can stay at home and get on the internet and Facebook is running and email's working and your telephone is working, there's no reason for me to stand out in my park in the rain and operate a hub. You have the ability to communicate. The TV's working, you can listen to the radio, you can get information that way. We only stand up when those normal communication lines are down, when cell phones aren't working, the internet's down, your local radio station is able to broadcast maybe sporadically, the TV stations aren't working. So that's when we stand up, when normal communications are down. And then a hub. What is a hub? It doesn't stand for anything. HUB is not short for anything. A hub is just an open area where neighbors will naturally gather after a disaster. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Next slide. So these open areas where neighbors naturally gather after disaster are all over the city. And the reason these are important is after an earthquake, if you were in a building during an earthquake, hopefully you took cover under a strong table and you were safe. The drop, cover, and hold guidance that you hear everywhere is exactly that. Drop to the ground, find cover, meaning get under a strong piece of furniture that will protect you, and hold on to that piece of furniture so that if it bounces across the floor, you're bouncing across the floor with it. And the reason you do that in an earthquake is because really what's going to hurt you is all the stuff falling off the walls, whether it's pictures or furniture toppling over, anything falling off of shelves, filing cabinets falling over, big pieces of furniture and stuff that's on the walls flying and hitting you. That's how you get hurt in a disaster. The building is not necessarily pancaking. It's the stuff all around you that will fall on you. And after a large earthquake, there's more than likely going to be aftershocks. And so it will feel very unsafe to be inside. You're afraid of what's going to fall on you next. So people naturally go outside after an earthquake, which is a great thing to do, to go outside. The wrong thing to do is to run outside during the earthquake. So put that into your head that it is not the smart thing to do to go running out of a building during an earthquake. Your smartest thing, your safest thing to do, drop to the ground, find cover, and hold on to that cover. Wait till the shaking is done, wait till everything has settled down, and then slowly, carefully make your way out of the building that you're in. So once you've made it outside safely, we will naturally gather in open spaces like this. It is truly what we do. Research has shown it. We've seen it in other earthquakes. People will gather together and they will look to their left and look to their right and they'll say, wow, what was that? And what do we do from here? So that collective, brain power gets together and you start figuring out how to survive post-disaster. So we got really smart and we said, well, if people are going to meet in these areas anyway, these open spaces, open to the sky where nothing's going to fall on you, if you're going to meet there anyway, let's help the neighbors around that area organize, and maybe let's put some gear there to help them organize. So a hub is just a place where you gather, and then if the neighbors in that area have organized, we call it an emergency communication hub. So next slide. So this is a map of Seattle. You'll see lots of circles. They actually have little lines drawn below them. They represent radio signals because we are communication hubs. So as you can see, they're all over the city. There's 143 hubs currently in the city. 66 of those are organized. So just a little less than half are organized, meaning neighbors in that area have gotten together. They're starting to talk. And many of them have gotten together and gotten that equipment to help them get organized. We're just trying to give them a good place to start getting organized, and you'll learn more about that. But there's still about 77 spots that are designated as the city thinks, and we think that people will naturally gather there. It's just a natural gathering spot. It's parking lots of churches. It's parking lots of, the local grocery store if you have one, parks. Pea patches are really good for that because, again, they're open to the sky and they feel relatively safe after an earthquake. So 77 are not organized, which is why we do events like this, where we're reaching out, educating people about what can be done and hoping to get more volunteers working in this capacity with us. So as you can see, they're all over the map, and I will give you the website to go look up and find the closest hub to you in just a little bit. Next slide. So we're going to look at how the hubs fit into the overall Seattle response plan after a disaster. So this pyramid, we call it the preparedness pyramid, I think it's really representative of how things could and should and will work. So I'm going to draw your attention to the top triangle first. That is what the city can provide. And their priority, if you've been listening to the Office of Emergency Management webinars, and I think it was not this last one, but the one before that, it was a firefighter talking. Their primary responsibility after a large earthquake or after a large disaster are to fight fires and search and rescue. They are rescuing people and taking care of fires. That's what they're going to do first. They are not going to be interested in any other kinds of incidents that are going on unless huge amounts of life are at stake. So fight fires and search and rescue, that's what they do. They also will be inspecting bridges and buildings to try and get transportation moving if they can and find safe places for people to shelter. So they need to do inspection of the building before they tell people it's safe to go inside. We'll be spending a lot of time and energy on that. And then they will be coordinating with outside agencies, trying to figure out what's going on in the city and then trying to request supplies and people to meet that demand. So as a normal citizen on the ground, what the city can do for me personally is very, very small. They're involved in much bigger issues than my little world. So let's jump to the bottom of that pyramid, and it's the bottom red section of that pyramid is you and your family. So your household. That's where most, like 90% of what you're going to need after a large disaster, that's where it needs to come from. The water that you're going to need for a week or multiple weeks to drink, hopefully can be stored in your household. And I know that's difficult. I get it. But water, food, medications, how you're going to use the toilet after an emergency, a large disaster like an earthquake, that's an issue. Because water and sewer lines will most likely break during an earthquake. So how are you going to use the toilet and where you're going to sleep? You need to figure that out within your household as much as you can. There are not places to go immediately after an earthquake where you can get water, get food, find a bed, be warm, be dry, be comfortable. Those shelters take a while for the city to open up, like 4 to 7 days. So you really need to figure out how to take care of your needs and the needs of your household for that, at least that first week or two before anything's going to be available for you to go to. So that's why the next level up on the pyramid is you and your neighbors. Because if you don't have it immediately in your household, maybe your neighbors can help. So you can work with neighbors ahead of time, which is the best time to prepare before the disaster. Work with your neighbors and start talking about this kind of stuff. Maybe you can store water at their household. Maybe there's a public area in your building where you can store water. Immediate aid, maybe you have a nurse or an EMT that lives, 2 floors above you or something like that. Maybe you can get first aid from them. Sharing resources is definitely something that will happen amongst neighbors. And I'm really a big proponent of cooking together. After a disaster, if I don't have electricity in my house, which means I have a stove that's no good to me, I really would enjoy going outside, finding somebody with a barbecue grill, and let's cook a pot of beans or rice or whatever together. So cooking together, I think, will be very, very important and something that neighbors will just naturally do. But if you talk about it ahead of time, it just could be more fun. So we've talked about what the city can do, that top little pyramid, and then the aid that you should be able to rely on from your household and your neighbors. And then that middle section in between what you have immediately around you and the city is where the hubs come in. So that green level, your community. Again, we call them emergency communication hubs. We only stand up when communications are down, and we have 2 core missions. We gather and share information, hence the communication in our name, and we match needs and resources. So I'll talk more about those 2 goals in just a second. Next slide. So an organized hub means that the neighbors have gotten together and neighbors are helping neighbors. Next slide. So this is, in general, when I say that these organized neighbors have gotten supplies, this is usually what they're in, a box like this, which is normally at construction sites or near parks. You will find rakes or shovels or chalk for ball fields, hard hats, all that kind of stuff. That outdoor play equipment or work equipment is typically what's in these boxes. They're very strong, they're very durable, and they're pretty nondescript. So this is what hubs typically look like when you see them out in the community, but you won't know they're hubs. Most of them are not marked as a hub. They're meant to be very inconspicuous, boring. And then, like I'm showing in that top right picture, most of them are small enough to fit inside of a pickup truck. They're not ginormous things. So next slide. This is a picture of the hub at my neighborhood. So in our neighborhood, our hub is in the park. We have a local park. We're incredibly lucky. And we have a tennis court there. So we put the hub up against the tennis court. It is secured to the chain link fence. And this is it open. And so it's really surprising to a lot of people that when we open it up, it's not full of food and water. They expect us to have food and water available for them, and that is not what hubs do. There's very limited resources of food and water stashed anywhere in the city. So that really should be available in your household, if at all possible. And if you can store enough for your household and you still have extra space, store extra food and water, because we're definitely going to need that. Anyway, when you open up the hub, this is what's in there. It's tables, it's chairs, it's whiteboards, it's signage, it's dry erase markers, it's magic markers. There's a bullhorn in there. There's lots of paperwork. There's forms in there. It is all about helping our neighborhood get organized. Next slide. This is a little busy. I apologize for this, but I'll walk you through it. So on the left hand of my screen is the greeter. If you were coming up to the hub and the hub is up and running, you're hopefully going to see the greeter first, because we typically position them where they would meet with the public first. And you talk to the greeter and you say, I just found out that the pharmacy is going to be open tomorrow between 3 and 5, and I want to let somebody know about it. So the greeter would say, go over to the information area, and you would tell that person what you heard, and then we would post that on a whiteboard for the entire community to know about. So pharmacy is open 3 to 5 tomorrow, and we would put the date, obviously, not just right tomorrow. Bring your medicine bottle and bring cash, because they don't have any ATMs. They can't contact your insurance company, and they sure as heck can't run a credit card. So bring cash. That kind of information would be up in that information area, available for the public to see. So that's how we gather and share information. We also, you can't see them because they're off screen, but we also work really closely with ham radio operators, and they're getting information from the city, and they're getting information from other hubs, and we're also posting that information to the information area. So we're gathering the information that we can, and we're sharing it with the public so that folks know what's going on, and their stress level goes down. Somebody wearing an orange vest and maybe a hard hat looks like they know what they're doing. You know, we look like we're professional and we're organized, and everybody's stress level goes down. So the other kind of person that would come to the hub, again, would talk to the greeter, and they're going to say, hey, I really need diapers. We've got a small baby at home, and I was just about to run to the store to get more diapers when the earthquake hit. So the greeter would send them to the resources area, which in this diagram happens to be purple. And they would look on a board, or they would talk to somebody about, hey, is there anybody else in the community that has diapers available? And if they don't, if there's no indication that anyone has diapers, they fill out paperwork that says, I need diapers. This is the size, and this is my address. Not my phone number, because you can't text me, the phones are down, but this is my address. If you have diapers, would love to hear from you. And so they go back home, and they're handling things at their household. The next person that walks up to the greeter says, hey, I've got extra diapers. Do you know, does anybody, our kid just outgrew them and I haven't gotten rid of them yet. Does anybody need them? And so the greeter sends them over to the resource area, and they see the piece of paper that says the family 3 streets over needs diapers. And so we've now connected those two families, those two households, the one that needed diapers and the one that has diapers. We're matching them together. And we do that with all kinds of things: diapers, food, a place to sleep, tarps to cover broken chimneys. If there's a water distribution center, we'll post that information. So lots of matching needs and resources. What's out there? What do you need? Let's see if we can make a match. So that's what we do. We gather and share information, and we match needs and resources. So a couple other places, areas in the hub, once they set up, is the volunteer area. We're going to have folks that volunteer. You know, I swept up all the broken glass in my house. Everybody seems to be okay. What can I do? That kind of person that comes up, we send them to the volunteer area, and maybe we've got some jobs for them to do. And then we also have an education area where we have gathered information that we think will be very, very helpful after a disaster, and we've printed it out. So we have it available. There's no looking on Google, 6 hours after an earthquake about what you're supposed to do, or how do you make an emergency toilet, or how much bleach do I put into my water to make it drinkable? All that stuff is not going to be available. So we've tried to think of what's going to be necessary and printed it out ahead of time. So we have it there, and we have it available. We have somebody hopefully standing by to help you find that information. And then there's a couple other jobs that I won't go into in the hub. If we were fully staffed, fully opened, it takes about 12 people to run the hub, maybe a little more, a little bit less. And then the hub manager down in the bottom left in red, that's the person that just kind of watches the overall flow, make sure that there's no huge bottlenecks, make sure that the area where the hub is open is safe, that it's not, you certainly don't want to open up under power lines or anything like that. So they're trying to create as safe an environment as possible. You're reducing trip hazards. You're trying to monitor the flow. Is there a better way to run things? And then they start thinking about the next shift. Whoever's stepped up and volunteered, and these are all volunteers. A lot of us are trained to work in the different areas, but we have made it so that you can step up and in like 5 minutes be ready to go. We've got a short job description. Hopefully the person that has the job ahead of you kind of gives you some OJT, and you step in and you start doing the job just like they were. And the goal of the hub is not perfection. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's as many different ways to do this as there are folks in the hub. Our job is to make things better, not make things perfect, but make things better. So I think the stress level is really as low as we can make it. We are not going for perfection. And then back to the hub manager, they just kind of oversee all that. They're looking for volunteers that are really stressed, or neighbors that are really stressed, and trying to help that situation and calm things down. So that was really fast, but that's how the hub runs. We're as organized as we think we can be without being militant. And it's a really interesting place to work. It's a lot of problem solving. People do amazing things.